Good to see so many of our members and our new friends here. Before I get into a long description of the Alliance and even our esteemed speaker tonight, it's appropriate to be welcomed by the great facility that we're housed in tonight, Fort William Henry Conference Center. And the CEO of Fort William Henry is Kathy Munsell, a good friend to us at the Alliance, a good friend to the community. Among her many roles, in addition to being CEO, is she's a member of the Lake George Park Commission, and both the Fort and the Lake George Park Commission were instrumental in the recent restoration of our statues at Lake George Battlefield Park. And Kathy, if you come up at this moment, please. I have a photo to present to her taken by Peter Wardham and his wife, Nancy Giard. That is Kathy posing with some of her fellow commissioners for the Lake George Park Commission.
Thank you, that's beautiful.
Your colleagues will be getting one each as well. The commission chair is there, as well as two other members of the commission and Kathy. So we thank Kathy for her ongoing support. And with that, Kathy, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you so much. I'm Kathy Munsell. I grew up in Lake George, moved away and came back. I think a lot of people do that. You never lose the love of Lake George. But you also, I never lost the love, and I carry it deeply along with all of you about the significance of our history here. We cherish people who love it like we do. We work really hard at the fort to keep it alive. You know, when our company bought the property, actually back in the 50s, because we're not just a historical fort, but we're a historical hotel and everything that goes along with that. When it was purchased in the 50s, the sole purpose of this land was to never let the history of Fort William Henry die and to get the plans and rebuild it. And the hotel was kind of a side project at that point, and we sold it and got it back. But there's so much history. It's not just the Native American, it's the French and Indian War, of course the Red War, and thank you all for celebrating that and actually being in a place that we love so much. So welcome to the ballroom at Fort William Henry. Thank you for caring about history, and don't miss the reenactment in September. It's our 270th year, and we will have many different events between now and then, between Last of the Mohegans and Fort by Firelight. There's a lot of fun stuff. So come celebrate with us beyond tonight. And thank you for being here.
All right. So, the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, I'm glad that so many of you here are members, and we hope the rest of you will soon. The literature on the table here is things actually that we have developed through the years based on your comments, your requests, and all that. So we appreciate those comments and suggestions, and we implement as many as are feasible. As I said, we would like for you to become members. We recently passed the 300 plateau. We're at 305 or 306 right now, which is a terrific jump over the last few years. And the best is still to be. We had, as I mentioned, the statue restoration this year, which many of you, including Lauren Hainsworth, who's in front of us, contributed to. And next year, as most of you know, we'll be having a reinterment of 44 additional soldiers primarily, but others who died of smallpox at Lake George in 1776, joining the 4 unknowns who are already interred in the park, who died at the Battle of Lake George in 1755. I'd like to also just kind of say a few things about some of the other programs we have upcoming. We have a sheet out there that describes what's coming up and how you register and all that. We have a number of programs for the general public, like this one. And we also have some for members only, because it's a high demand, and we have to prioritize our members getting seats on. So we have another floating history tour, which is very popular, sells out quickly, led by Todd Earl, our captain in the back. And we're having another of those, the south end of Lake George, the day after Labor Day, September the 2nd. The afternoon cruise is sold out, 1 o'clock But there's a 9:30 cruise where we still have some seats left. So if you're a member and you want to participate in that, you will love it. There's no one who has taken this cruise who has not been overwhelmed by the simplicity of it and the importance of it in terms of seeing things from the water that were important to our American history. So if you're a member again and you're interested in 9:30 embarkation on the 2nd, let us know quick so we can get you that spot. On September the 14th, we have John Stroud in the front here. John, Mark Silo, and John Eric Nelson will be leading tours of the three sites where the Battle of Lake George took place. The first at a place called Bloody Morning Scout in Queensbury, the second at our Lake George Battlefield Park, and the third at the notorious Bloody Pond. That is a members only. We're sharing that program with the Warren County Historical Society. We have a limited number of seats on the buses we'll be using to transport people. So again, sign up early for that, and there will be a nominal cost, I think, of $20 to pay for the refreshments and the fuel for the vehicles we'll be using. And the other big one, we have one, Jay Levinson is here on October the 12th, that's a Sunday, or the 14th, whichever one's a Sunday. It is referenced on our handout there. Jay will be giving us a presentation on the history of Native Americans in the Adirondacks. We don't have the venue for that yet, but we're working on it. But we have it scheduled for 4 o'clock that Sunday. It's Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day weekend. If you're available, keep an eye out for that. You'll be getting communication on it. And finally, but by no means least, December the 12th, we are commemorating the 250th anniversary of Henry Knox's noble artillery train, where he transported 60 tons of artillery from Ticonderoga all the way to Boston in the dead of winter. And he stayed at Fort George in our battlefield park longer than anywhere else, over 2 weeks total. He was there as he's desperately trying to learn the animals and the carts and the teamsters, the people, to help do that transportation. He did it in less than 6 weeks, 300 miles in the dead of winter in the 1700s. And we're going to have 3 different ceremonies on December the 12th. One, a reenactment at the head of the lake, right down the hill here. A second, a reception with author Rick Atkinson, the author of The Fate of the Day. And the third, a public session at Lake George High School, where Rick will answer questions. He'll be hosted by Bruce, and people will have the opportunity to purchase his books, have them signed, etc. So, more information is coming on that. And as I said, look at the reference that they've given you on the handout. Finally, the raffle. We have a very aggressive member who's not here tonight, so I won't disclose his name. But he initiated, without anyone requesting, a raffle that will benefit the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance. For a $20 ticket chance, you'll get a foursome at the Sagamore Golf Club. It's good for the rest of this year or through 2026, depending on your availability. That's a value of over $800, we're told. So you take a chance on that. We're limiting the number of chances sold to 50, so there'll be, you'll have 1 chance at 50 for every chance you take of getting that. So we're going to have that raffle Saturday here, because that coincides with our annual meeting that will be hosted right here at Fort William Henry, where we'll have several presentations. So if you have the opportunity, the folks at the table out front will be selling those raffle tickets. At the conclusion of Bruce's presentation, we'll entertain questions. Rob Sanasardo, who's somewhere in here, there he is, will be kind of doing the Phil Donahue thing of walking the audience and selecting you to ask questions or make comments to Bruce. So you'll have the opportunity to hear Bruce and answer your questions. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Bruce M. Venter He's a native of Albany. He is the president of the premier American History Touring Company, America's History LLC, which hosts the premier conference on the American Revolution every year. How many more premieres are in this? And it's really the first and foremost history touring company and conference presenter in America. And if you go to his programs, his tours, his conferences, with the help of people like Lynn Venter, Brian Mack, and other, you'll really be entertained and educated simultaneously. Bruce recently appeared on the C-SPAN where he talked about the Ethan Allen. It's become a new specialty of his to talk about the capture of Fort Ticonderoga in 1775. And that's another arrow in his quiver because, as we all know, he is the author of the Battle of Hubbardton, the rearguard action that saved America, which has won several awards and is probably still available for purchase, even at the front of the table here. So, Bruce is involved in many organizations. He's a member of the Board of Trustees for Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, of the Fort Plain Museum, and some county 250 organization somewhere that I'm sure he'll tell you about at some point. If he's not wearing clothes that say it, he'll let you know about it. But Bruce is, he can tell you the story certainly of his fixation, and that's what it was with Diamond Island, since he lives in eyeshot of the island, and his labors over the year to have that Battle of Diamond Island, which he'll be educating us about tonight, commemorated with signs. So I'll let Bruce tell you that story. I'll let Bruce tell you the whole deal about how the signs happened, how the Battle of Diamond Island happened, and where we're at in terms of commemorating that and other events too. But for now, please welcome warmly our dear speaker tonight, Bruce Venter.
Thank you, John. But no, I can finish the rest of the introduction. I noticed you left out quite a bit. But anyway.
I was losing them. So.
Anyway, this is not a talk about the Battle of Hubbardton, but I am promoting the book because, you know, gas on the lake is very expensive these days. So if you want to help me out, you can buy a couple of copies, give me for Christmas or whatever you want to do. Oh, and by the way, I have a boat tour, or we have a boat tour, excuse me. You don't boat on them anymore, though, right? Our tours?
No.
No, you don't. That's a long story. Anyway, I'm doing a boat tour of Valcour Island. So if you're interested, it's September 19th. It's in conjunction with Fort Ticonderoga's American Revolution Conference, and it's on a Friday, and we're going to visit Valcour Island. We're going to have lunch at the Basin Harbor Resort, and then we're going to take I think it's a 2-hour boat ride on Lake Champlain, and we'll go to the bay where Arnold abandoned what was left of his fleet. And then we're going to go over to the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. Chris Sabak, the director of the museum, is going to lead the tour, and I'll be along to give him some jibes about Benedict Arnold, someone I don't really care for. And but that'll be fun. It'll be a great tour. So see me afterwards if you're interested. So I'm going to talk tonight really about the Battle of Diamond Island and these signs. And I put one of them over here. That's one of the signs that's on the island. That's like the proof edition of the sign, and we'll have some up on the screen later on. As you see, my official title now is the Mayor of Diamond Island. I declared myself the mayor, and I was out showing John Denuzzo and Lorna Ainsworth the signs about a week or so ago, and I said, you know, I'm the mayor of Diamond Island now. And Lorna said, Yeah, and your constituents are birds and bugs. So I don't know, I probably could get them to vote for me. Anyway. I bet some people in here know Marissa, right? I was wishing she was here. The reason her picture is up here is because getting signs on Diamond Island started in 2014. I used to think it only took me about 5 or 6 years. It actually took me over 10 years to get those signs on there. I found in the Venture Archives, I found an email that I wrote to Marissa. I had written an article on the battle that was published in Patriots of the American Revolution magazine, and I think that was around 2010 or 11, and I had an interest in Diamond Island, and so I wrote to her based on an article that was in the Lake George Mirror, and that was Halloween of 2014, and then she responded about a week later, and she said, "I'm thrilled to get your enthusiastic email regarding the Diamond Island project. And it warms my heart to know of a summer resident that has a feeling of reverence for the landscape, which it so critically needs and is appreciated." So that's when this thing started. Can you believe it? It's taken me all this time, but I don't talk about anything else but Diamond Island now, right, Lynn? But that's when Marissa started with me, and she came out to the island. She rode out in that dory she has, if any of you know her very well, and went through it. She thought it was a great idea, but nothing happened. So this is what I look at every day, and I left that sign. I left that picture in here. That's a picture that from when I first did this slideshow, and you can see I'm carrying a lot more weight than I do now. But I always remind myself, don't start looking like that guy again. And that's probably an extra large shirt I have, so I'll be donating that to John Denuzzo and his clothes drive. You know, he has that clothes drive up in Grant Lake, so you'll get that. But that's Diamond Island, and that's where we are in Still Bay, and I look at it every day, and I thought about it for a number of years, and then I decided to do some research on it. I found out that it was the only naval battle fought on Lake George. Here's an older photograph of it. Let's see if I can make this work. That's working. Oh, here we go. That's Diamond Island. This is Green Harbor here, okay, Cooper Point. And you can see it's not very big. I think it's only about 200 yards long, about 30 or 40 yards wide. Now, there is some speculation that the island might have been bigger during the 18th century. The dam that's in the northern end of the lake was not there in the 18th century. So the lake, theoretically, according to a fellow named Tom Nesbitt that I talked to, said the lake was about 3 feet lower. And so if the lake is 3 feet lower, there's a chance that it might have been bigger on this side. Are there boaters here that have been out that way? You know there's some shoals out there, and I think that maybe perhaps that's what caused Diamond Island to be a little larger than it is today. And I'm going to tell you in a few minutes how many men they had on Diamond Island. Now, this is the Saratoga campaign. This is the British commander, John Burgoyne. He is 55 years old. He has come up through the British Army in the cavalry. But he's a good friend of the King and Lord George Germain, who was basically running the war from England. And he has a plan to come down from Canada with an army, have another army come across the Mohawk Valley, and have General Howe, who is the commander-in-chief in the colonies, come up from New York City. They will split New England from the rest of the rebellious colonies. And they think that that's where the rebellion is. It's New England. We cut these guys off and we'll be okay. We'll win this, put down this rebellion. So Burgoyne leaves with an army of about 9,000 men in June of 1777. 7,000 are regulars. Half the regulars are redcoats. The other half are Germans. They are hirelings. They have been hired by the King of England to help the British Army. And they're mostly Brunswickers. They're not Hessians. They're mostly Brunswickers. He's got some loyalists with him. He's got some Canadians. And he's got about 400 natives. This is a map that just shows you basically what the campaign is all about. It, let's see. Oh. Oh. There we go. All right, I'll have to be very careful. I'm getting the evil eye right here already. Anyway, you know, Burgoyne's coming down from the north, and some ledgers coming through the Mohawk Valley. He gets stopped at Riscadee, and General Clinton will come up in October, but that's irrelevant to our talk today. Now, this is another map of the area, and I show it to you because it has Diamond Island right here. But don't, during the question and answer period, don't say, Bruce, you got the wrong date on Diamond Island, the battle, you've got troops marching in wrong directions. I couldn't be responsible for this map. I'm only using it because it has Diamond Island on it. But if you look way up, where is it, right in here? It was made for the United States Military Academy at West Point. So I don't know who's making the maps for them, but it's very, very different. But it's a good map for me because we've got Ticonderoga here, we've got Diamond Island here, and we've got Fort George here. And after Burgoyne left Skenesboro, which is over here, going down to Fort Edward, end up at Saratoga, the supply line from Canada will come down to Ticonderoga. There'll be a supply depot on Diamond Island, and there'll be Fort George, which the Americans evacuated in July of 1777. Now, the reason they put the supplies on Diamond Island is because Burgoyne and his commanders thought that Fort George was vulnerable because it was on land and the Americans could surround it. If he had supplies here on Diamond Island, he might be better off. And they really did. They put some of their large guns on Diamond Island. They also put a lot of excess baggage and supplies on Diamond Island. There's an order from General Ladesel, who was the commander of all the German troops, telling the army to move their baggage back to Diamond Island. So it becomes a very significant installation. That's a picture of Diamond Island from the west side, on the west side. Now, I told you about General Burgoyne. This is General Schuyler, an Albany boy like me, and he is a Dutchman. He is a merchant. He has fought in the French and Indian War, and he is the commander of the Northern Department at this time when Burgoyne starts his campaign. He will be replaced in August by General Gates, but at this point, he is trying to stop Burgoyne, but he's not having a very good time. George Washington writes to Schuyler, and I'm not going to read that whole thing, but what he's telling Schuyler is that it might be good if we put someone on Burgoyne's left flank, which would basically be in the area called the Hampshire Grant, or what we call Vermont today. All right, so in July of 77, when Schuyler's still in command, Washington's thinking about keeping some force on Burgoyne's left flank as he's moving down from Skenesboro to Fort Edward, down to Schuylerville, which was called Saratoga at the time, and how he eventually gets to the Saratoga battlefield. That's a picture of General Gates. You can start booing now if you don't like him. I don't like him personally, so I'll go boo. And he has the temerity he's wearing this medal that he's been awarded by the Congress for his victory at Saratoga. Of course, he's he's not a great guy. I mean, everybody know about what he did at Camden. He got on his horse when the British attacked, and he rode his horse 20-some miles in the opposite direction of the enemy. So this is one of my favorite guys. He Benjamin Lincoln is a Massachusetts man. He's been involved with the Massachusetts militia. He was a farmer. His family were farmers, but he also got himself involved in politics in Massachusetts. And he's about the same age as George Washington, about 43, 44 years old at this time. And he is going to really, he's not given proper credit for what he does in the Saratoga campaign. And I want to impress that to you tonight. Because he's going to come up with an idea to get behind enemy lines, to get behind Burgoyne and attack his supply line. And he's going to be the guy that orchestrates all of this. Now you see, he looks a little sleepy in the portrait, doesn't he? He suffered from narcolepsy. And so he would fall asleep during meetings and things like that, or on his horse. I never did that when I was meeting with the superintendent. I never did. But this guy did. Now, everybody finished that thing? Okay. Now, Lincoln is going to he has an army in Vermont of about 2,500 men. Some say it's 2,000, 2,500 men. And he comes up with this idea to attack the British in 3 places. One of the men who are going to command a significant part of this expedition is John Brown. Now, Lincoln is going to send a contingent of about 500 men to attack Mount Independence. He's going to send another contingent to attack Skenesboro. He's going to send Brown to attack Fort Ticonderoga. Now, here's the picture you really want to see of Brown. He never lived long enough to get his portrait done, unfortunately. He was a real hero of the Revolution, and he was unfortunately killed before the war was over. Now, John Brown is from Western Massachusetts. He's about 30 years old at this time, and he is a lawyer. He went to Yale. He's involved in the rebellion. He gets himself elected to the provincial Congress in Massachusetts, and he has a very interesting career because it involves a guy that I really don't like. You know, I don't like Gates, but I really don't like Benedict Arnold, okay? And I know there's some fans out here of Benedict Arnold. Anyway, John Brown will be commissioned by the Massachusetts Provincial Congress to go to Canada and to take the temperature of the English merchants and the Frenchmen who are up there, as well as the natives, to see if they would join America in the rebellion. And he does this in February of 1775. And he doesn't fare well. He writes a letter back to Dr. Joseph Warren, and we have Dr. Warren right here in the front row. And he will say, they're not really going to join this rebellion. However, the last paragraph says, you know, if a rebellion breaks out, it might be good for us to gather some troops and capture Fort Ticonderoga, because there's a lot of cannon there that we could use in the rebellion. And he says, I know just the guy that could do that. And it's Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys. And so John Brown is along when they capture Fort Ticonderoga, along with Benedict Arnold, who was a hanger-on at the time. And that's not Benedict Arnold, that's Ethan Allen. And he's capturing Fort Ticonderoga. Brown will subsequently be part of the Canadian campaign. He goes up to Canada under General Montgomery. And you're shaking your head, yes, I know. You know I know this. He's a major, and he fights under Montgomery, and he's promised a promotion to lieutenant colonel by Montgomery. But unfortunately, Montgomery is killed on New Year's Eve, right? 31st? Yes, okay, he's killed. Arnold takes command. Arnold said, you're not getting your promotion. Now, where did that stem from? The fact that Brown backed Ethan Allen rather than Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold went up to Ticonderoga. He was flashing around this commission of a colonel that he got from Dr. Warren, and that's a whole other talk. But anyway, briefly I'll tell you, Arnold wanted to command the expedition to capture the fort, and he was denied it. And so Brown and Arnold are already at loggerheads. Brown also studied law under Oliver Arnold, who was Benedict Arnold's cousin. And maybe his cousin told him bad things about Benedict Arnold. I don't know. But anyway, Brown gets furious with Arnold, and in 1777, he's finally had enough. He's trying to get Arnold removed from command. George Washington said no, Gates says no, Continental Congress says no, and John Brown says, I know there's something wrong with this guy. And Brown was right, because in early 1777, he publishes a handbill laying out all the problems with Benedict Arnold, and at the end of it, he writes this: money is this man's God, and to get enough of it, he would sacrifice his country. This is a prescient observation by Brown, because 3 years later, Benedict Arnold, as you all know, tried to sell West Point to the British. Now, getting back to General Lincoln sending out the three groups, John Brown, who was going to be very much involved with Diamond Island, his first objective is to capture Fort Ticonderoga. Now, as I said, Samuel Johnson, the other 500 contingent, is going to attack Mount Independence, where there are a lot of German troops. The Prince Friedrich regiment was on there. And Brown will attack the landing at Ticonderoga. He will capture a sloop. He'll capture a number of gunboats. He'll capture several dozen bateaux. He'll capture ammunition. He will free about 100 prisoners of war who are being held at the Lake George landing by the British. These men had been captured at Humberton, which is the talk that will commence after this one. And for anyone that's interested, Brown will also capture about 300, maybe 330 British regulars in his attack on Ticonderoga. And it's not going good for the commander at Ticonderoga, Brigadier Henry Watson Powell. Unfortunately, Brown didn't bring any artillery with him. He had to use the artillery that he captured at the landing. And that artillery was small. They were 3-pounders and 6-pounders. And so he's firing at the fort, but he is not making any headway. So he puts up a white flag and he goes to the fort, or he has someone go to the fort, and they demand the surrender of the fort. And the British commander, Henry Watson Powell, thinks he's got enough to hold out. This is not going to be something he's going to give into. And so he writes back a very interesting note to Colonel Brown. The garrison entrusted to my charge I shall defend to the last. And when I see that, it always reminds me of, that's an 18th century way of saying what General McAuliffe said at Bastogne. When many of you know, he said nuts. And the Germans didn't have any idea what he was talking about. But I think Brown knew that he wasn't going to get inside and have that fort surrendered. So he's going to give it up. He's going to give up trying to attack the fort. One of his orders or his admonitions from General Lincoln was, don't get yourself in a situation you can't get out of. I'm paraphrasing it, but basically he's saying, you know, make a demonstration, capture what you can, destroy what you can, but don't get yourself in so deep that you lose your force. And Brown obeyed those orders right to the T. Brown knew what he was doing, and he really did a nice job in what he captured and what he, in terms of releasing the prisoners too, at Fort Ticonderoga. So, Samuel Johnson, who was attacking Mount Independence, he's not doing very well. They're just trading shots and nothing's going to come of that. Colonel Woodridge, who is attacking Steensboro, he's been successful, but there's not much action going on down there. And Brown is a little disappointed that he wasn't able to capture Ty, but he knows that there's another objective that he might take a shot at, and that is the supply depot on Lake George on Diamond Island. Now, he leaves Ticonderoga with a 3-gun sloop, 2 gunboats with 1 gun in each, 12 pounders, 1 gun in each gunboat, and about 20 bateaux, about 340 men altogether. Most of the men are from his 3rd Berkshire County Militia. He does have some of Whitcomb's Rangers with him. He has some of Herrick's Rangers with him. And he has some of Seth Warner's additional regiment of Green Mountain Boys. And so they're heading south on the lake. And the weather is terrible. This is on the 22nd of September, 1777. And so he is forced to come around and stop at Sabbath Day Point for the night. Everybody know it, good. You get extra 10 points for saying that. And so he stays the night, and during the night, a sutler comes along, and he's brought in to see Brown. And a sutler is a merchant that sells supplies to the army, usually soldier goodies, you know, rum and combs and whatever, playing cards. And he has come from Diamond Island, although he's supposed to be an American sutler. And Brown questions him, and he gives him a parole, which means that go about your business and don't get involved in any military exercises here. Well, the sutler, whose name could be Ferry, could be Terry, it's a little confusing with the sources, and he decides he takes his parole, but he doesn't go home. He goes back down the lake, and he gets to Diamond Island, and he advises the commander at Diamond Island that there are Americans coming for him. Now, one of the great portraits of the Revolution, this is Captain Thomas Aubrey. That painting is in Wales, in Cardiff, and he is 37 years old. He's from Wales. He has been in the British Army since the 1760s. He was a lieutenant in the 4th Regiment of Foot, and he's now a captain in the 47th Regiment of Foot. And he is the commander of Diamond Island. Diamond Island, at this time, September of 1777, has 2 companies of the 47th Foot. Now that regiment had fought at Lexington and Concord, and more importantly, Bunker Hill. And they really got decimated at Bunker Hill. And so I'm figuring he's got about 35 men in each company, so let's put about 70 men on Diamond Island, that little island. Now there's one source that says that there are Germans on the island also. The source says there's 90 Germans. I find it hard to believe that you could put another 90 people on that island, but it's just one source. Aubrey is prepared He's got some heavy guns, 12-pounders, and he makes some breastworks on the island, and he's ready for John Brown. That's a picture of the north end of Diamond Island. And you can see might have been taken on kind of a rough day. This is September 24th, when Brown gets to Diamond Island. And remember, it's September, it's going to be rough. Most of his men are from Western Massachusetts. They're not sailors. And so he's got guys navigating a sloop and a couple of gunboats and some bateau. The bateau fellas are waiting to launch an attack on the island, like, Normandy or something. That's what the sloop looks like, roughly. We have an expert on boats here, which if he doesn't like that sloop, I'll try to change it out next time. Russ Bellico is here. That's the western side of Diamond Island. And so what happens is, Brown gets to Diamond Island with his fleet. They start firing away, and they are firing shot at each other. Now, Brown says the battle lasted about 2 hours. The British officer at Fort George said it was about an hour and a half. Either way, it's a pretty extensive battle on water, and it's the only naval battle fought on Lake George. And so it's either an hour and a half or 2 hours. If I was Rick Harrison on the Porn Stars, I split the difference with you and say it was an hour and 45 minutes. But you don't watch that show. Some of you do. And so, anyway, Brown writes in his report that I was holed between wind and water. And so he has to tow the sloop away. It's damaged so much. And he will tow it away to Warner's Bay. Now, a 19th century book about Diamond Island said that Brown went to Dunham's Bay. And I originally thought that was correct. It makes sense because it's a straight shot to Dunham's Bay from Diamond Island. But then my good friend Mike Gabriel, who is an expert on the Battle of Bennington, a professor, he found a pension record of a guy that was in Brown's fleet. And he said that we went to Van Warmer's Bay, which translates into Warner's Bay today. And so Brown pulled the fleet away from the action. They went into Warner's Bay and they abandoned their fleet. They burned the sloop, they burned the gunboats, and some of the bateau. They had 2 men killed and 2 men mortally wounded, and some others were wounded enough that he couldn't bring them off, and he had to leave them in Warner Bay. The commander at Fort George, Lieutenant George Irwine, will write a letter to General Burgoyne, who now has been fighting against the Americans at Saratoga. And they fight a battle on September 19th, they fight a battle on October 7th, and in between, on September 24th, Brown has attacked Burgoyne's supply line. And so the lieutenant writes to Burgoyne and says, we didn't have any casualties. We set out with our gunboats and we were able to recapture the cannon that were on the American gunboats, and it was a great victory for us. However, Burgoyne's in tough shape here after October 7th. And his army is on half rations. He's been beaten on October 7th by the Americans. And he gets the letter on the 25th that his supply line is in real danger. And so I always like to think that Brown had some effect on Burgoyne, and maybe on his ultimate decision to surrender on the 17th of October, because when Burgoyne writes a letter on October 20th back to England to George Germain, he spends about 6 paragraphs talking about the action on Diamond Island. That's only a little island, there's only a few men on it, but it made an impact. So I like to say that John Brown was living rent-free in Burgoyne's head. And so he just sort of, Burgoyne said, man, what else is gonna happen to me? I gotta do something. And things are getting really bad. The doors are closing in on Burgoyne. And so he surrenders on October 17th, 1777. Now, I have a very, very interesting image for you that I don't know if anybody has seen this. And I got it from Russ Bellico. It's an image of a gunboat that was used by Brown in the attack on Diamond Island. There's Diamond Island. There's the gunboat. That's Sally. That's our first people. But you can see she's very happy that they're not going to capture the island. Now, let me get back to the other part of this lecture about the signs. Last year, sort of like the gates opened and everything happened for us in a good way. I want to thank John Denuzzo. Where are you, John? Put your hand up back there. John was relentless in having meetings with the DEC and always brought me along. And all of a sudden, they became very cooperative. Up to this point, and I told you at the beginning, 10 years I've been trying to get these. I didn't understand why we can't put signs on the island. It's a picnic island. Hundreds of people are there during the season. Why not let them know that it may be one of the most historic islands on Lake George? And finally, we found a guy, Andy Niles, great guy, and he really helped us out. And he paved the way. I wrote the text for it. Russ and Lynn Holman helped me with the images. That's one of them right there. That's a mock-up. And there's the other one that's out there. And it tells you the whole story of the Battle of Diamond Island if you go there for a picnic. And so I can rest easy now. I thought I was going to die before I got these signs. Seriously, Lynn knows how old I am. And so I wasn't sure that was going to happen. But anyway, DEC came through. We have the signs out there. So if you have a boat, go out there and take a look at the signs and enjoy the signs. You go up to the north end of it and watch Brown coming down in the sloop and everything like that. And I'll tell you, I know these signs are good signs and they really serve the purpose because that's Sally, and you can see that she's approving of the signs. That's the second beagle. And I didn't realize we brought her out to see the signs, and she jumped off the boat without a leash and immediately ran to picnickers who were cooking steaks or something. That's what beagles do, right? And so, and then I found out after we left the island that there's a sign there. When I came back again another time, there's a sign, no dogs allowed. So if anybody here tell DEC that I had a dog on Diamond Island because I'm getting a lot of trouble, maybe they'll take my signs down. And thank you very much. That's it. You're going to take that. This is your first time doing this. You need to practice. It's on the bottom there. Press the bottom.
There we go.
Yeah.
Definitely not as good as Phil Donahue. I'm going to open up the floor for some Q&A. I'm going to start on this side of the room. Does anybody have any questions?
There is like a memorial statue on the end of Diamond Island.
Yeah, talk into that. I can't hear.
Okay,
at all.
There's like a memorial statue on the
Yes.
edge of Diamond Island.
Yes.
But it's very old and hard to read. Is
Yes,
that
it is.
connected to this story?
In some way. The island was purchased in the 19th century by Spencer Trask for his wife, and she put that obelisk on there. And there is some reference to the battle that was on the island. It's on the bottom, but you can hardly read it. It's on a brass bronze relief, but yeah, that's what that's all about. Yeah, but the main focus of that obelisk is it's like a peace monument. Peace is the conqueror of war, or something like that. It says. So it doesn't really specifically. It's not specifically about the battle of the Revolution. It's the whole 18th century warfare of French and Indian War and what have you. There was a guy over there.
Getting away from history a little bit to folklore about Diamond Island, there was talk that there was a farmer once who left some
You
pigs.
guys talk about that. I do a wonderful presentation on real military history.
I get this all the time.
Whole life skills. Go ahead.
And the pigs were left there, and apparently when they went and got the pigs 6 months, a year later, they found that it had eaten all the rattlesnakes, and they were still in their stomachs.
Yeah, and their tails were
Maybe
wrapped.
alive, yes.
Yeah.
So,
He reads those spiral books put out. Read my books, they're all well documented. Who else? This is all being filmed too, I want you to know that, so you'll be embarrassed on film.
I'm wondering if there was any evidence in Warner Bay of the boats that were burned at that point by Brown.
Take that microphone and give it to the fellow with the flowered shirt there.
Yes, there is. There is a gunboat that was found by a World War II veteran in the early 1950s. And that person, when he passed away, his family donated the artifacts that he had found to the Lake George Historical Association. So if you go there today, there's a case and it has British regimental buttons, it has ordnance, buckles, and that are associated with the British type of uniforms at that period of time. So we're fairly confident this is the gunboat. It is in Warner Bay. It has been picked over, and we hope no one tries to go dismantling what's left of it. This guy and a lot of other guys got there first, but it is in the museum at least, so that we're sure this is one of the gunboats, and the remnants there include the buttons of a regimental uniform of a British regiment that was at Ticonderoga at the time in 1777. So we're pretty sure this is one of them. And this answers, as Bruce has suggested, the idea that we all thought it was done on this bay. Right across, easy to find. No, it was Warner Bay. And this answers it. We found, one of the vessels right there.
Yeah, and if you're familiar with Warner's Bay, 9 Alley runs right there. That would have been an old trail that Brown would have used to get over to 149, which would have brought him up to Fort Anne, and then subsequently Steensboro, and that was his objective.
Also, there were two, back in the early 1960s, two bateaux with brass bow cannon at the bottom of Warner Bay that were found. We searched for them later, bateau below, and couldn't find them, but I had a letter from a guy that wanted to sell these two cannons. They were sold originally, I gave a talk at the library in Glens Falls, and originally I met the guy that found them. They were only about 18 years old, and they sold it for $25. This guy wanted $10,000 for them. Fort Ticonderoga was gonna buy them, but it would be against the law because they were found not like in the 1930s, which the guy told me originally, they were actually found in the 1960s when it became against the law to take something like this. So it's another proof, although I don't know where those are, we couldn't find them, but they were there once.
Good enough for me, Russ.
I was just gonna say, we have a place in border base, and we can watch it against the road to, this diver there. It seems in recent years, people are still plus the 5 or 6 bucks, just at the lower end of the border base.
Yeah, well, this is not in the lower end of the boat. But, you know, trying to prevent people from trying to, we've seen wrecks before that have totally dismantled. And that's what happened to the, Diamond Island. It was a favorite place for divers. Diamond Island,
Bruce and I talked about this. This was a favorite place for divers, and I go there in the early 70s, back in 1968, I hate to admit it. But there were boatloads of divers coming off for cannonball hunts on Diamond Island. I mean, they just, and there was a wreck there, and Joe Zarzinski has mentioned it in his book. And a cannon was raised, and it's right here in Fort William Henry. But whatever happened to that wreck, we could never find it because we think it was totally dismantled by these hundreds and hundreds of divers that came every year. And that was the name of the game back in the 1970s or 1960s, you know, looking for souvenirs. So.
Any more questions on this side of the room?
How did Diamond Island get its name?
Well, that's a good question. Some say that there's quartz on the island, and that's another tale that they would talk about in the 19th century, and that some nefarious people would find the quartz and shine them up and sell them as diamonds. And you have a couple, don't you? So if anyone...
They weren't on the island, they were in about 12 feet of water, just.
That counts, because we said the island was bigger. Yeah, listen. All right? Now, I want you to know that when Burgoyne went back to England, he wanted a court-martial and he refused it. It was refused. So he had a parliamentary hearing, because he was also a member of parliament. Not like today, but you know, in those days you could be a general and you could be a politician, active. And so there was a whole hearing about what happened and why he gave up the King's Army, the first time in history that the entire English army surrendered. And so in that testimony, which he published as a book in 1782 or 3, it's called The State of the Expedition from Canada, and he says Diamond Island in that. So it had the name Diamond Island in at least 1777. You didn't know that, did you? Did you know that? No, you didn't know it. Now you do.
Any questions on this side there?
I was just curious, is there any mention at all of the British casualties on the island?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Zero. Yes. The lieutenant who was in command at Fort George, in his letter to Burgoyne said, His Majesty's troops suffered no casualties. So there were no casualties. And I could understand it because I'm thinking of Brown weaving up and down like this, you know, trying to get a shot out and not hitting a thing. So there's a lot more cannonballs out there. I need one for the mantle. There's a guy over there, he had a season too.
What happened to Brown later in his career?
Oh, great. I didn't even want to give that up because that's a whole other talk. But John Brown, after the 1777 campaign, he went back to Pittsfield, where basically he was practicing law, and he became a judge, but because the war was going on, there really weren't any court cases. And then in 1780, the British decided to send raids into the Schoharie and the Mohawk Valley, and they also sent Christopher Carleton down from Canada to burn Fort Anne and like that. And so Brown was colonel of the 3rd Berkshire County Militia, and also he was put in charge of the state levies for Massachusetts, and he marched in the summer of 1780 to Albany and then to the Mohawk Valley, and he was put in charge of a place called Fort Paris. And on October 19th, 1780, he was ordered by his commander, Robert Van Rensselaer, to hit Sir John Johnson and his and Joseph Brant and his Indian allies, and it's now known as the Battle of Stone Arabia. And Brown went out on horseback with his men, about 130 of them. He was well outnumbered by Sir John Johnson, and he was killed immediately in the battle, shot in the heart. And now there's a monument to him in back of the old Dutch church there in Stone Arabia. Interestingly, he died on October 19th. He was born on October 19th. So now, whether he ever found out about Benedict Arnold at West Point is speculation, but with the way things were moving back and forth with messages, you know, September 20th to October 19th, there's a good chance that Brown might have sat around the fire before the 19th and said, I got that guy, I knew that guy, you know. I have to think that's true, but I can't prove it. But I'm going to try to prove it, right, Brian? Yes, sir. Brian's from the Mohawk Valley. He loves all that stuff out there. But unfortunately, he died, but he died a patriot's death, and I'm glad you asked that question. I didn't know how much time I had. I can't fit everything in. The other guy got 90 minutes, so didn't he, the last guy?
Any more questions?
Hi, when Burgoyne surrendered Saratoga, did that include those guys on Diamond Island surrendering?
No.
They got away?
And I double checked this recently with the leading authority on the Saratoga campaign. Many of you know Eric Schnitzer. And what happened was when Burgoyne surrendered, his army was marched over to Boston, but Fort George, Diamond Island, they evacuated back to Ticonderoga, and then later in the year, Ticonderoga was evacuated also. So Captain Aubrey did not surrender. No, he did not. That's a good question.
Okay.
Oh no! Larry!
I'm gonna take it easy. Very good talking again. I got a comment on the 47th Regiment. Aubrey's 2 companies stationed on Diamond Island, and they did an excellent job defending the island. But what happened to the rest of the 47th Regiment, I found very interesting in my studies of the Saratoga campaign. The additional 8 companies of the 47th were marched with Burgoyne down to the Battles of Saratoga. They were held in reserve. Now, you made an excellent comment that how what a veteran regiment that was. They had the most experience of any of the other regiments in the British Army, but yet Burgoyne held them in reserve. They were back defending the hospital from any possible attacks, the supply base, and so on. So why wasn't the most experienced regiment in the British Army at the time at Saratoga used? Well, at first I kind of just figured, well, they were...
I know the answer. Are you going to let me answer it? No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you going to answer it?
I think we both know the answer. I'll let you answer it.
Yes, well, in the British Army, you could be a general, but also be colonel of a regiment, because you made a lot of money if you were colonel of a regiment. Like General Cornwallis was colonel of the 33rd Regiment of Foot. And what Larry's talking about, the 47th, their colonel was Guy Carleton, who was the governor of Canada, as well as being a general in the Army, commander-in-chief of Canada. And And so Burgoyne and Carleton did not get along because Carleton wanted to command the 1777 campaign, and he was denied it by Lord George Tremaine because they hated each other. Nothing like today. I mean, you know. And so it's so interesting that I think that's why Burgoyne put the 47th on Diamond Island, and Larry's shaking his head, is because he didn't want any glory for that regiment if there was a battle, because Guy Carleton would have got some credit, and they were not happy with each other.
Well, that's not exactly what I was going to say.
Well, but it's the way
I was going to say, you and I weren't there, and we would have been better commanders. You hit it right.
I look good in that coat. I know.
Good job, thank you.
Ron's got a question. No, come on.
No, it was asked already.
Oh, okay. All right. My old friend from Walden there, he was a reporter of the Times Union, and the Times Union ate me alive many times when I worked in Albany.
Bruce, just a quickie, with all the talks and the places you've gone to, people you know, why don't you have to dress up like a reenactor?
Why don't I ever do what?
Dress up as a reenactor and have a little fun. And
I can't sleep at night on the ground. I don't think I can. Oh, just talk. I have a uniform of General Burgoyne. I used to do the Saratoga parade. Yeah, I have a great talk. If you all want to hear about Jane McRae, I have a great talk. Tell John I want me to do it. But I don't do it for free.
All right, this wraps up our Q&A. On behalf of the Lake George Battles Park Alliance, we thank Bruce for today's presentation. Outstanding job. Thank you, Bruce.